we'll talk about the home office as a hybrid place. Is the home office a private or a public space? How can leadership deal with conflicts? And what effect does the home office have on creativity? Harald?
I would like to share my screen. Can you please?
Yes, please go ahead.
Well, yeah, thank you also for having me. And um, I think I can refer to a lot of what was already said in my talk. But I actually really want to focus more on the effects on our relationships, the way we are related with others, and also with ourselves when we work from home. And I gotta start with this key question: why trust matters? I mean, it's always good to sometimes really go back and start from square one and ask why trust matters. And I always thought that this model by Patrick Lencioni was very spot on. It's also aligned with my experience as a manager of an organization that are, when you look at what are the actual key dysfunctions in a team, it always starts with an absence of trust. If there's no trust, things becomes really complicated. This is like trust is the single most important decomplexifier in our world. So if you don't trust, things become complicated, complex. So absence of trust, fear of conflict, lack of commitment, avoidance of accountability, and the inattention to results, those are the five big dysfunctions. And I really can strongly relate it to that also from a practical point of view, but it's really the basis. And if you have no trust and and you try to avoid conflict, etc., usually this is a sign that you have frozen creativity, and probably more importantly, the capacity, the capability of leadership to self-reflect, for self-awareness, is sharply declining in an environment like that. Of course, there's always this hen and egg problem, but we don't have time to go into detail there. So, and now how does a home office work affect trust? Let's talk about what is a home office work. I mean, there's this wonderful Ray Oldenburg's theory of places. You're all kind of are familiar with that. The third place is the public space. The first place is the private space at home. The second place, work. So office is a kind of semi-public space, and that's the office how we know it, or we're there with different person. That's very important. So when we're shaping our role is shifting. When you're in your office, you're someone else. You're in a different role than you're at home. Why? Role is a relational context because there's a different way you're related with the world, with others, with technology that's around, with the light in the room. So office spaces have their own gamut, their own design. So it's different. That's the office as we know it, and that's the home office. And here's the thing: it's a hybrid place. You're sitting there in your underwear. You're working from the same table as your kids. And even when you look down there, the right place, it's a public space because you're other than going with your colleagues to the bar and have your beer after work, you're sitting in the room and you're celebrating the birthday of someone in whatsoever. So what do we have like is a fourth hybrid place. And it's really truly hybrid because it integrates all three other places, or it blends all three other places. So it's a private place, it's a workplace, it's public, and it's kind of like and as you see, there's some ambiguity arising, and I want to talk about what the effects of this ambiguity is. And for that, we have to understand that those different places have different network morphologies. They have different are network structures. So a home is usually like a social circle, one social circle where everyone is linked with everyone else. Uh, the office place, at least at the formal scale, and when you have different units, is more like structured like a brokerage network with a lot of structural holes between different units in an organization. And public spaces, that's where social circles intersect. They're kind of folding networks. You have like an overlap of different worlds when it's a public space that's really working. Um, like in marketplaces in Southern Europe or so. So the key thing here is that if you want to have like resilience in a society, it's important that you have like a kind of pulsing and cycling through this place. When you walk from home into work and then after work into a public space, you become like a different person, and you are a different person. So and the thing here is through entering a different space, and this is what psychologists know for for long. Entering for specifically in the psychodrama, that's what you learn. Entering a different place makes you different in a way that you also reflect about yourself in a different way. So for self-awareness, as we heard, you go out and have a walk in nature. Why have a walk in nature? Because the different horizontal lines, the different texture of the environment creates a distance to your own emotionality. So your capacity to self-absorb, to self-regulate depends on getting out of the room, getting out into a different place. And this cycle shall just indicate that a healthy life means that you're shifting and moving through different places with different morphology. So those different places and have usually different, as I said, are network structures, different morphologies. And to understand trust in network science, there's one basic model that you have to understand. It's very simple. It's the law of triads, the law of triangles, as we call it. And it just means that if you have a one-to-one relationship between two people, like here on the left side, we call it a dyadic relationship. Dyadic relationships structurally are always weak. What does it mean? If we have no common friends, like in those triangles on the right side, you see on the right side, this relationship is embedded in 4 triangles. The structural pressure in this relationship to align decision making, to align action on the right side is much higher than on the left side. If A and B on the left side disagree on something, or there's a abuse in trust, the social costs are much lower than on the right side. So on the right side, there's a structural embedding that abusing trust, you pay a high price for that. So loyalty and to be trustful on the right side, because of the structure, how this relationship is embedded, is at a completely different scale. And this is happening when you look at different network structures. Are very fast. There's shared value and shared values. So we have like in teams like a transactional dimension, but we always have also this relational dimension of shared identity, shared stories, shared hobbies, shared way to look at the world. The more shared values, the more you move to the right side, the denser the networks get, the more of those triangles you have. And the more triangle, as I said, the higher the costs of abusing trust. And why I bring this up is when you think about how usually the digital work from home works, there's a strong tendency for like getting out of like this kind of clusters into a diadization of relationships. What do you mean by diadizations? You talk with your supervisor, everyone is linking with the supervisor and coordinating with the supervisor, but there's like an absence of those environments where you really like engage in triadic settings. Believe me or not, to hang out at the same Zoom call is not necessarily a triadic setting, because usually it's a one-to-many communication. Like now, I'm communicating with you. You are like 60 or so people in the call. This is not. This is a very asymmetric way of communicating, and it's very hard to have like this crosstalk. Sure, you can encourage people, let's write something down in the box and comment on something, but we see how hard it is to have this kind of like deliberative, co-creative discourse. So there is like a tendency to decrease the trust relationship, because networks get thinned out. Or by the way, this is something that we know very well from research. Networks under stress tend to tend to become dyadic, tend to have like more hierarchical structural whole network shapes compared with those kind of structural fold networks that we want to see if they're really vivid, resilient, dynamic, agile, and robust at the same time. So, and again, what we see when we are, by the way, a good team is capable to move those different stages depending on the task. So different tasks require different aggregations and morphologies in teams. But what I want to say here is that I call this spasmodic condensation. If you always hang out at home, and your family is playing in the background, and you are sharing your work time, your time after work on the same screen in the same room, and then you have the stress of delivering something. This is, and you're losing this kind of going in and out of this kind of changing different textures and high density, low density morphologies. Like here we're strongly, so if everything is condensed in one place, this is like a spasmodic situation that's not sustainable, it's not healthy, it does not it does not strengthen creativity, and it's just like it just like an environment where the regenerative loop, the regenerative stage in the loop just has no thriving environment. It does not find an opportunity to regenerate. Another thing, and this is the last one I want to share here. I mean, there would be much more to talk about, but I really want to keep it time beyond time here. How does it affect? And this is something I really think a lot about. How does it affect our way to perceive closeness, proximity, and distance? When we're in a room, and this is something that there's a high cultural sensitivity in the offline world, how close we are and when it's the right distance. When we are too close, where we become like cross a boundary of intimacy, or when is the right distance. We all know when we enter our office exactly about what is the right proximity in this meeting, so that we can engage with each other. It's a very complex biological, neurological process in our body, that it feels right, that there's the right distance. What is the right distance in the digital sphere? What is it? Are we not? We are seemingly are in the same space. Are we close or not? Or are we? Or is there a distance? Is there like what is it? So we post something that's intimate. We post something that's personal. Is this are we now close or not? So there's like, in the offline world, when you look at the left side, when you think about, it's no real world to translate it, as Stammtisch is a group of people who regularly meet over years, and there's a ritual of meeting again and again. It's a German word, Stammtisch, it's hard to translate. It's a very stable and robust relationship, stable in the sense of, we know that we're gonna meet each other again tomorrow and the next years and so on. So this is like a place of high trust. Again, very high costs if you if you do something wrong and misuse our trust of friends. Or you are in a team. In a team, there's closeness. You work together on something. You have to start up. You're hanging out in the same office, and you work on something, and you have your meetings, very dynamic and agile. Though you don't know if tomorrow the air will be around because there's dropouts and there is mobility. Uh, where here in a hierarchy, hierarchies are like there for stabilizing relationships, right? But there's a cool distance in the hierarchy, right? So it's like there's a supervisor. There's some kind of always um, emotional or somber tone required in the hierarchy because we're not friends. You're my boss, and so yeah. And then you have like networks like in the original sense. You go to a party, you hang out, you're doing networking, you meet new people, have small talks, and just checking out what's going on. And here's my theory, and maybe I'm wrong, but that's what I'm observing. Digital closeness, what they call, like when I talk with you in a video and I talk with you, like think about the YouTubers who speak very personal to you, create a kind of environment or a climate of closeness, right? Like a personal relationship. But there is like an ambiguity. This is like this is not this kind of relationship. So are we close or are we distant? Are we close or are we distant? So there's like an ambiguity, and this ambiguity in the clinical syndrome of it, and the clinical diagnosis of it is like the borderline syndrome. In the borderline syndrome, you're like really like shifting between closeness and distance constantly. So those kind of digital environments harbor a kind of borderline ambiguity in terms of defining how close we are. And this makes a lot of problems when it's about also trust, because trust definitely has something to do with the reliability of something, of the predictability, and therefore also like that it's holding. There's a moment of closeness involved. So, and again, this just shall show that there's a disorientation in the relational status. Are we close or are we not? Are we friends or are we not? Can I trust you or or not? So this is something that gets introduced, and this brings me kind of to a wrap up. And again, there would be much more to talk about. Just the time. So I think that are those kind of digital hybrid places, if you get stuck into that, or came along with a really increased risk to structurally weaken trust. It's a structural effect. It's not an effect of goodwill or of willpower. It's just like it's happening. And the same like that digital places showing increased risk of prohibiting the cycle through different places. So again, you get stuck in, and this has a huge effect on your self-reflection. Also, by the way, on your capacity for conflict. You avoid. It's easier to avoid conflict in the digital sphere. This would be a different. This would be another aspect. By the way, I haven't talked about it. I think there's negative effects on creativity, energy level, and the level of self-observation should be expected. And therefore, I think, yeah, team performance requires the pulsing. It's the recycling through different relational morphologies. In each of those morphologies and environments, you're a different person. And a digital fourth place, if you're cycling through it, can be a super valuable place. So there's nothing wrong about, don't get me wrong, I'm not looted. I don't want a digital, this fourth place is amazing. It becomes like horrible if it's the only one. And I think we can agree on that. So how can we, this is number 5 here, where are the boundaries? What kind of compartmentalization strategies and rituals do we have, that we have zones where we know now we are here in the first place to use now we're in the second, this is the fourth place, and here it's really the public space. how can we guarantee, or how can we design environments in a way that we keep up those boundaries and thresholds and those transition zones? Because, and this is this is the last thought before I stop, because this is the most problematic thing of the digital space. There's no north, east, west, south. I don't know what do I mean when someone is at their Zoom call on the right side or up or down from myself. What does that mean? This is a topological space and not a metric space, to talk in mathematical terms. This is not a Cartesian space. It's a topological space with completely different roles, and therefore talking about distance and physical and emotional and physical distance is completely different and doesn't make a lot of sense. It intrudes a lot of ambiguity, and I think we should be very, very careful in how excited we are that we can work from home wherever we are in the world. Uh, I think there's a time for that. Don't get me wrong; it's great, but to stay alive, to regenerate, we have to cycle. There's a pulsing. There needs to be like the shifting of roles. This is what renews us and keeps us, yeah, happy and hopefully also alive and hopefully also happy. That's like
Thank you, Harald.